Hi everybody, Nathan Davis here for NHDPHOTO. Today I'm going to be going over a tip on basically how to improve your photography and basically how to broaden your skills a bit with use of your equipment. Now, most all, well, I would say all digital SLRs, it doesn't matter the brand or company that makes it, comes with light metering. Now this is very important for basically setting up any shoot. You want to know what type of lighting you're going to have. If you're having very even lighting, then the light metering in auto will work. I'd never shoot in auto, but if you're going to shoot in auto, then evaluative light metering, which is what Canon calls it, might be called something a little different, would be a viable option. And that usually looks like that little box with the looks like an eye in a box. That is evaluative light metering, and what that is that means that it's taking the full frame. You have a mirror assembly inside the camera. I don't know if you can see that. Newer cameras, they use something a little bit different if they're doing live view. This one has live view as well, and the light metering works off the sensor. This works off an actual mirror assembly in there. It's hard to say. There is a mirror, and it's actually a two-way mirror. Behind it you've got a light meter, and it's basically going by whatever you set it to. So if you set it to evaluative, then it's going to take whatever's coming through the lens, the full frame, and evaluate the exposure. This is if you have it set to anything being set by the camera, even in TV, AV, P, where it's setting up, those variable settings. It's going to use the light metering to determine what's best for the exposure. Now, when you have it in evaluative, it's taking the full frame into consideration, meaning that if you have even lighting, that's fine, because bright sunny day, everything's evenly lit, you're going to have a proper exposure across the board. But that's not always the case when you have indoor situations where somebody's sitting in front of a window. That can cause problems because you have brighter light coming in through the window than what the interior lighting is. So the shutter speed is more than likely going to be faster than what's warranted in that case. It might not raise the flash if you have it set to auto. So with that, what I prefer is spot. Now you have usually 3 or 4 different light metering settings, and let me just break those down. So you have evaluative, which I went over. Then you have center weighted. Now center weighted can also be used with the window situation as well, but what center weighted does is it takes and puts more emphasis on the center part of the frame. Now if you look through your viewfinder, you'll see a grid of sorts. It'll have a number of boxes, and one with in the middle with a circle around it usually. There's different configurations though, but your center square and that circle around it, the circle around it would be center weighted. So it would put more emphasis on that area, the center part of the frame, and the lighting there. It's like kind of, I guess, an 80-20 blend, so it's got 80% of its priority here, 20% on the outside. So it's mainly taking into consideration that center area. So if you have somebody sitting in front of a window, you could put it on center weighted. The person inside is that's in silhouette, if you had it in evaluative, would come out properly exposed in that case, because the emphasis for the exposure would be on them. Now the more extreme end, and again you could use spot for that as well, is spot or partial. Spot or partial is basically the very center part of the frame. So it's in the very center of the frame. That's what's being taken into consideration. That's it. It's omitting everything else. All the rest of the data for exposure is not going to be analyzed. It's only going to look at that center part of the frame. And the reason is that if you have an extreme condition where you are, let's say, at a concert, and the person is up on stage and they're under a column of light and everything else is dark. Now if you had the camera on evaluative or even center weighted, it more than likely is going to blow out the highlight areas, which means that there's no detail on the subject under that beam of light. Now, if you put it on spot or partial, which, get that out. Looks like that. It's usually a dot in the middle with the brackets. You can take and this one has partial as well, which depending on the camera they're all different. You know, it may appear this way, it may not. That's how it appears on mine, is like a columned area inside of brackets, you know. But again, every camera is different. But usually the labeling, the naming of the light metering falls within that category. Now, partial or with spot, it's within the very center part of the frame. And when you have that extreme condition where somebody's up on stage and they're under a column of light and the rest of the stage is dark, any other pick would cause really blown out shots. When you put it on partial or spot and you aim the very center part of the frame, that very center box on the person standing under the column of light, it will set the exposure to a faster shutter speed to capture that person, which they're under ample lighting, and everything else will be dark. And so learning these things about light metering is important to diversify out your shooting ability, because you may not be comfortable with doing full manual exposures yet, and if you're not, at least learn your light metering. That is a very important tool on your camera. You're kind of selling yourself short if you go to events and you just leave it on evaluative and then complain that your images are blurry or blown out, they look, you know, horrible. It's because you're setting your light metering wrong. Light metering is what tells the camera, or gives the camera a gist of what it's looking at. You know, because the camera, even though these are compared to cameras 20, 30 years ago, are highly intelligent, they're not smart enough to determine, you know, what exactly you want it to take a picture of and how you want it exposed. So you're going to have to communicate with the camera in some way, and light metering is one of those ways. Light metering's been around for a long time. It's changed. In the manual cameras, it was there mainly to tell you if the settings you have chosen will give you a proper exposure or not, and then it morphed into the abilities it has now to actually control the camera settings and pick and choose what would be best for the conditions you're in, whatever you're trying to shoot. And if you aim the camera correctly, you know, highlighted part of the face, the most highlighted area, you'll get shutter speeds that will be appropriate for whatever you're shooting. And don't leave it in spot all the time. You know, again, it depends on what you're shooting, and make those determinations on the fly. So if you're, again, even lighting, evaluative. If you're doing something where you have broad contrast issues, like somebody sitting in front of a window, then center weighted. If you're at a concert and somebody's on stage under a column of light, you know, bright beam of light, and everything else is dark, then you want to go with spot or partial. So learning those is a good start. You know, I would say anybody needs to learn manual exposure, and how to do it. It's not applicable in all situations. I'm not saying, you know, it doesn't make you a photographer to throw your camera in manual, especially if you're, you know, on a gig and shoot everything that way. That's why there's different modes on your camera. P is a good one. You know, yes, go into it and learn the manual settings, learn how to set up a manual exposure, but understand when that is appropriate and when not to do that. And again, having those tools where you learn about light metering, understand its purpose is for the exposure, and communicating with the camera what your lighting situation is, you know, kind of very bare minimum, but still you're communicating with the camera this. That helps with improving your photography, and it will help with giving you more of the results you want consistently. And that's the key here, is when you become a photographer, is consistency. Anybody can go pick up a camera and go around shooting halfway decent pictures. But what should set you apart is your ability to adapt to the situation and your ability to get stellar shots no matter what. You know, even if it looks like you're not going to be able to, getting a stellar shot kind of sets you apart, because then you've mastered the tools of your craft. You know, you've mastered your equipment enough to be able to adjust on the fly. Understanding your equipment, understanding your tools is just like any other trade. If you understand the camera, the lens, and your other equipment to the letter, when you walk into any situation, you will be equipped to handle whatever's thrown at you. And that's important. Thanks for watching.